I cannot say that Romania is featuring high in hate speech, but if I say it doesn't exist at all, I would not be telling the truth. Of course, there are instances of I wouldn't call it hate speech, it's more mistrust. But I think that these instances of mistrust have been provoked what I call the breaking news effect. Breaking news effect of things that were not happening in Romania but were happening elsewhere. No doubt the Paris and Brussels, what happened in horrible events in Paris and Brussels, this summer in Cannes, more recently in Berlin during the Christmas, all this is shown in TV, and sorry to say, I mean, I don't want to blame journalists. Journalists do an excellent work in feeding the public opinion with information, but sometimes the language used is very inaccurate, and they tend to call refugee to people who are not refugees, who are other things, but not refugees. They can be foreigners residing legally or irregularly, but they are not necessarily refugees. But there is this tendency to call everybody a refugee, and therefore this is provoking a very perverse effect in assimilating the public opinion, assimilates refugees to criminals, terrorists, and other things. When statistically it can be very easily proved that most of the perpetrators of these horrible events had nothing to do with refugees. Another challenge that refugees, be it from the Middle East or from other regions of the world, face is that, in Romania in particular, is, I think we have to work more in having the population, having the communities, the local communities, knowing more who these refugees are. There is something very, very interesting. In 2016, we conducted a participatory assessment with refugees, asylum seekers in various parts of Romania. We were asking them what are their main difficulties, their main challenges, and many of them referred to learning the language, employment, low salaries in Romania. And it was for me very, very remarkable that nobody complained about negative attitudes from the local population. When we were asking them this question, they were saying, no, we have not faced any problem. However, my analysis of this is not that the people are very nice to refugees. My analysis of this is that in Romania, local population and refugees rarely interact. They don't know each other. They don't know. Refugees do not mingle with local population, and the local population, they don't know who these people are. They don't feel bothered by them. So one of the things that we need to find a way to do, if we are talking about increasing integration opportunities, is to get the people to know who these refugees are. Why did they come here? What are their main problems, their main concerns? Because I have the impression that there is no understanding between both sides, simply because they don't know each other.
Okay.
Well, the refugee campaign, for me, I mean, it's a campaign I like very much, because it's a campaign with very clear messages, And it's a campaign that states the obvious. It's not reinventing the wheel. The campaign is phrased around three basic needs of refugees. The first need is every refugee child should get education. Why? Because 50% of the refugees in the world are children. And you know, for me, when I was working directly when I was more involved in the assistance program to Syrian refugees in countries like Jordan and Lebanon. For me, it was very sad to see that we were going to lose one generation, meaning one generation of refugees, of young refugees, who would not have access to education. That is a full generation that could be lost. Luckily, things have improved, and the government and the international community have made a lot to ensure that refugees, these Syrian refugees, have access to education. But Syrian refugees are not the only refugees in this world. There are many other refugees that still have problems to have access to education. The second message is every family needs somewhere to have a safe life, and this can be understood in two ways. It can be understood as every refugee family needs to receive protection in another country. But also it can be understood as every refugee family needs a roof under which live. So it's a combination of the right to asylum with the right to have a decent place under which a roof to shelter the family. And then the third message is every refugee needs to work or need to learn skills to have access to the labor market. This is something which we are using here. I mean, I am repeating very often here in Romania. A refugee does not want to receive charity. A refugee does not want to receive pocket money. A refugee wants to have the means to sustain him or herself and his and her family. They want to be normal persons. They don't want to be called refugees. They just want to be a normal neighbor in any neighborhood of a city or a village in Romania. Before working in Romania, I was working in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan, and I had once a young refugee from Afghanistan who came to talk to me about his problems, and he had a long list of complaints, this and that and that and that. And then I said, okay, you have a very long list, but if you had to choose one thing in which you think I can, or UNHCR can help you, what would you choose? And he told me something that I will never forget, because he said, he was thinking and he said, you know, what I want is, I want to become a taxpayer. And I said, a taxpayer? You want to pay taxes? Nobody wants to pay taxes. Why would you like to pay taxes? And he told me, because if I have to pay taxes, it would mean that I have a salary. And if I have a salary, it means that I have a job. And then I could sustain my family, and I wouldn't have to come to complain to you every other day. And then I thought it reflected very well, no? What refugees want, a normal life, even to become taxpayers, which is something that nobody likes, to pay taxes, but paying taxes is a sign of normality, no?